Welcome back to the Hardware Unbox podcast for episode, I think it's 61 this week. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the GeForce RTX 5070 Ti, everyone's favorite new GPU that you cannot buy for even remotely close to the MSRP. So we're going to be talking more about the pricing situation of those GPUs, what's going on there, and then a bit of analysis of where AMD's at the moment. Again, I know people are probably thinking that we've been talking about this a while in some of our other podcasts, but we now have a GPU that's kind of similar to what the performance expectations that we're expecting from AMD's cards. We now know where that's sitting for performance and pricing, so we can start making some calls on what we think AMD needs to do for their upcoming 9070 XT. So lots of interesting discussion in this one as we head into more GPU release seasons. Let's get into it. Well, Steve, another GPU launch this week, and I know that you were just so excited to talk about the 5070 Ti in your video. You were just pumped for this one, loved it. It was great. Everyone's excited in the GPU. Oh, wait, you're telling me you can't buy them for any price, that the MSRP was fake? Oh, I never would have seen that coming.
Yes, you seem like you're enjoying my misery a bit too much over there, Tim.
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny. It's a little bit funny.
Thanks, appreciate you. Yeah, I did suffer through the 5070 Ti review. I guess when it's a situation where the performance uplift is pretty miserable, that's one thing, right? So take the 7800 XT, for example, basically a 6800 XT. We've seen it all before. We're not discovering anything new. The performance testing's somewhat pointless and therefore very painful, having to do it all and then comment on all of the results. But that's one side of it, right? It's like, okay. But in the case of like the 7800 XT, while not a super exciting, amazing product, I'm just using this example because it's a similar situation. At least there was a price reduction there. So people have been holding out. We're actually getting a meaningful improvement. So you could save quite a bit of money by getting one. So there was that. But with the 5070 Ti, it's just like, at the MSRP, the $750 US MSRP, it's like, yeah, okay. It's like not a great or super exciting product, but it's competitive and it's fine in the current market. Doesn't really do too much. You really probably should have just bought the 4070 Ti Super a year ago. Similar situation to what we saw with like the 4080 Super versus the 5080. But if you hadn't done that and you were looking at spending about $800 US on a GPU today, then it's like, okay, this is kind of nice. This happy accident, good timing. I get this card that's pretty good.
Yep.
But the big but, you can't actually buy it for $750 US, and we knew that wasn't going to be the case prior to release. We'd sort of learnt the lesson with the 5090 and the 5080, and it's been it's been some time since the 5090 was released, and the situation has seemingly only gotten worse, it seems.
Yep.
So
yeah, I mean, there's a few issues with this launch, but yeah, I think the configuration of the card again is probably, it's not really a 5070 Ti if you're talking about like generation on generation, and a lot of people have brought that. But maybe we could talk about that later. We'll start by talking about the price, because I think this is probably the most egregious example we've seen of a GPU just not launching at the MSRP. And I say that for a few reasons. Firstly, because we knew ahead of time what the price was. It was widely leaked, widely talked about, whereas at least with the 5090 and 5080, there was some expectation that there might be some MSRP models. With the 5070 Ti, it was very clear that was not going to happen. And then on top of that, there was a lot of weirdness with this one. For example, reviewers were sampled the MSI Ventus model, I believe, from NVIDIA.
There was a few models, but the Ventus model was for, I think, Asia Pacific region. I think the US got the Asus Tough Gaming. There was about 2 or 3 models that were seeded globally, just depending on the region.
Well, the weird thing about sampling at least the Ventus model, with the Tough Gaming, it was also a bit weird there as well. With the Ventus is, first of all, it's an OC card. So NVIDIA's not sampling the base model card to be reviewed. And then secondly, it's not an MSRP card either. In fact, the real price of the Ventus model is not even close to $750. It's like, I think I'm looking at the video cards article now, Best Buy had one for like over $900.
Oof.
I think
Jeez.
Micro Center, the cheapest MSI, they had the MSI Ventus listed at $910.
Well, it's funny you mention this because very weird, particularly because they had two separate embargo dates.
Mm-hmm.
So there was the initial embargo where all of the 5070 Ti reviews, seemingly all of them, have gone live. And that was for strictly MSRP cards. So no OC models, because you don't really get OC models at the MSRP. That's not what the base MSRP is for. So it was base MSRP models only to be reviewed. This was the NDA that everyone signed. So I agreed to the NDA, and then NVIDIA samples us and they sent me an OC card. And I'm like, well, I'm a bit confused here. Am I allowed to be part of the day one reviews? Because I don't have a card that qualifies for the day one embargo. And they're like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. It's going to be an MSRP card, so you can just use the Ventus OC.
Well, okay.
And then
it's not an MSRP card. On the MSI official website, they listed it as an MSRP of $900 with a promo price of $830. So it's not an MSRP card.
Yeah, and then I had the Aero OC as well from Gigabyte. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to feature this card in the day one review because I'm not really benchmarking it. I just showed the thermals and how it clocked. But I'm not doing a separate content piece on these cards because
that card's nearly $1,000.
Yeah, I just can't. I can't do multiple 5070 Ti videos. We're doing one this week. I'm out. Like, one was enough pain. So that was all very odd. The fact that we never actually got sampled a base model card and what should technically eventually be an MSRP card, we never got that. We only got OC models. And then I have to bring this up. I don't know if you saw it on X. Oh, seriously. The combined brain power on that platform sometimes blows my mind. 3D Center posted like metadata for, I think it was.
Oh, I saw this. Yeah.
I can't remember it. I don't even want to read it because it was so dumb. But that 3D Center posted the metadata, which is great. They do an awesome job of that stuff. And we, along with one other media outlet, had it around 11%, which was on the lower side. I think Tech Power Up was more like 18%, and then the rest were like, around 14%, which is a pretty tight grouping anyway for a different assortment of games and whatnot. But one reason for why we could be a few percent under is because we actually benchmark when we do a GPU review. So when we're not looking at specific cards or models, when we're looking just at the GPU performance, we run them all at the official clock specifications. So reference clocks, basically what Founders Edition or reference models run at, because it would be weird to test, say, the reference model 7900 XTX and then a Sapphire Nitro Plus OC 7900 XT model and then use them as the baseline performance for each GPU, because you would get skewed results then. So because, as we were just talking about, we got sent a Ventus OC model, which, look, it's not heavily overclocked or anything like that, but still, even if it's 3% or whatever, I don't want that skewing the data by potentially 3%. So I downclocked the card to the reference or official specification, so that the official boost specification in this instance. And I tweeted at 3D Center and told them this. And they were like, yep, that makes sense. Good job. Message received. Understood. And then I got like half a dozen to a dozen people calling me brain dead, idiot, various versions of stupid. Why would I do that? Like, and they gave all these amazingly high IQ examples of why you shouldn't do that. And I'm just, and then it got into the language used, like, oh, what you're doing's okay, but you said you were underclocking it to the official spec. Really, that's just the reference spec. And I'm like, we're splitting hairs.
Oh no.
The thing that annoys me the most about a platform like that, or just the people on it, the way they respond, is it's very okay for clarification to be required. Like if
Mhm.
I say something to you, Tim, and you're like, oh yeah, I think I know what you mean, but I don't want to make any assumptions here, and then you ask a question. So by official spec, do you just mean like the reference clock, so the reference boost clock? So you're just doing like a clock offset. I'm like, yeah, that's right. Okay, cool. Like that's it. Imagine your response being, that is brain dead, and then waffling on about why it's brain dead. So anyway, it's
Yep.
just a slight tangent, a bit annoying there. I
Mhm.
often wonder how many people, because a lot of these uh, tweets, X's, I don't even know what to call them now, they do get a lot of views. And I wonder how many people see them and are straight away like, oh, that's a stupid person, or that's a stupid take, or they're like, oh, is that a good point they're making? Like, did they get that wrong? I always wonder about that sort of stuff. So,
I I don't even know. When I saw some of those comments, I'm like, I don't even know what's going on here. Like, what am I reading?
well,
Um,
these are people that accuse us of being like these YouTubers who are tech experts but aren't, and we never
right.
claim to be tech experts. But then you go on X and these guys like trying to position themselves as know-it-all tech experts. So they're sort of doing the thing they're accusing us of doing and getting it really wrong and spending plenty of time explaining that they don't fully understand the subject, or that if they did understand the subject, they're just making these really extreme assumptions and being quite aggressive while doing it. It's just weird. It's weird behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe they'd have a point if there was like no base model because there's no NVIDIA Founders Edition. If
Mhm.
there were no actual non OC cards, then downclocking it would be potentially not really an accurate reflection of what you'll get, but there are definitely non OC cards. The
Yeah.
While you were sampled the Ventus 3X OC, the base MSI model is actually the Shadow 3X.
Mhm,
That is the
mhm,
supposedly $750 card, and there's an OC model of that card as well for the same price, which is kind of stupid.
mhm,
But whether or not that card really exists is obviously highly questionable. But that's what they're at
mhm.
least advertising, and so you'll see similar from Asus and Gigabyte as well. They've got a base non OC model that probably doesn't exist.
Yep. At the end of the day, we're talking about a couple of percent here. So
Hmm.
to use extreme language over that is just it's
Yeah.
not great. Not a great hill to die on to begin with. Like, but anyway, and the 3D Center guy cracked me up, or whoever manages that account, because I replied to him saying, because he said, thank you for the clarification. And I replied saying, you know, something like along the lines of, I'm glad you didn't need this sort of spelt out for you. You understood what I meant by official spec. And he's like, to assume anything else would be illogical. I'm like, yeah, I would hope so. Oh,
Yeah.
God. So anyway, nothing new there.
Yeah, but I mean the pricing of these cards just in general is ludicrous. I mean, there's just really no way else to put it really. And there's just some weird things. We sort of mentioned the promo price thing, which seems to be a bit of a trend with these launches of cards being positioned at a certain price, but that just being like an introductory price, which is kind of just a fake price, really. So a lot of MSI cards in their official stores have quite high actual MSRPs, like $900, $930, but there's like a brief promo price for a couple of weeks where you can get it for maybe $50 to $80 less. The Asus 5070 Ti Prime model, that was listed at a $900 MSRP. Then apparently some people pointed out, like, why doesn't Asus have a base model? So then suddenly it became $750, but then is later just going to be $900 anyway. So, you shared me that link of that Vex video where he spoke to NVIDIA, and NVIDIA was
Oh,
saying
yep.
that claims of price manipulation are ludicrous and unfounded. I don't know, man. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I have evidence because I don't have evidence. Let's be very clear. There's no hard evidence of emails or something confirming this. I'm just analyzing this based on what I'm seeing.
Well, the available evidence, let's say.
If I say look at the available evidence, and I see that a $750 GPU, there are a handful of models theoretically available, but not really available because they're just never in stock. And
Mhm.
then most brands go directly from a $750 model to a $900 model. That doesn't scream to me like normal, reasonable GPU pricing. So again, if we look at Gigabyte, for example, they've got a WindForce model for $750 theoretically. If you go up to their next model, which is the Eagle OC, that is $900. $150 difference in one tier. And Nvidia's trying to claim that there's no weird price manipulation going on that's absurd. It's just supply and demand. You look at most of the cards, and most of them are minimum $900, $920, $940, $980. Some of them are $1,000. The price of what's supposed to be a 5080, the 5070 Ti Aorus Master, is $1,000. The MSI Vanguard Launch Edition is apparently $1,020, which is, I think it has an MSRP of $1,000, but at Best Buy it's $1,020. And you're trying to sit here and say nothing weird is happening with these prices. This is just supply and demand. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. That's just not true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, it's not true for a number of reasons. In a lot of instances, we know what the supply is. We can certainly work out supply. Supply hasn't been amazing. Again, it seems to be pretty tightly controlled. I mean, obviously, this is all a result of a lack of competition, but this was all planned out, carefully planned out. They turned off the tap on the 40 series a while ago. So if you go somewhere like PC Case Gear, for example, they list 4070 Ti supercards. They start at like $1,330 and go up to $1,600, which is the most expensive model. All of them with free shipping. None of them are in stock. Whether they're getting stock again in the future, I don't know. But then you go over to the 5070 Ti, and again, there's 3 RRP cards, which are like MSRP cards, which are 1,509 Australian dollars. I don't believe there was really...
Which itself is kind of a joke, because the conversion is just Nvidia tax applied there.
The problem that you're seeing in the US is just amplified in other regions. So they're like first-party scalping's taking place in the US, and then it's just out of control elsewhere. But the point being that the recommended retail price is meant to be 1,509 Australian dollars. Major retailers such as PC Case Gear have exactly three cards listed for that price. And none of them are in stock, and I don't believe they really got any stock of those cards. Then the price jumps up by more than $100 to models like the Ventus, the Palette Gaming Pro, and then it goes up to $700 and more. Like, it quickly jumps up. But they've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They've got 16. This is one retailer. They have 16 5070 Ti's, all $100 or more over the base price. They have just 3 at that base price. And again, those 3 models. Actually, there's another 4 models that they don't even have like to be decided pricing. Those 3 models at that $1,509 price tag, you just won't see them come into stock. Even the ones that are $1,630, probably not going to see them come into stock. Quickly after that, it jumps up to $1,700, $1,800, $1,900, $2,000 for the Tough Gaming OC and Extreme Affinity Zotac model. And the Gigabyte Aorus. So it's just, it's out of control. And also, again, like, you were able to buy a 4070 Ti Super for about $1,300. Just, as of, I suppose, a month ago. And now you're having to pay, for similar performance, you're having to pay an additional $300 if you can get one.
Yeah, I think the thing that really highlights to me that something weird, very suspicious is going on is just the large gap between the base model and the next up tier models, which is even the case in Australia. You see that quite large gap. It's much more normal that you'll see, $20, $30 as you get from like the base model, which, and again, at launch, it's not crazy that base models are not super available, but the idea is that you have a base model that will be available at some point, and then maybe at launch, you have to buy the OC card or the slightly higher tier card with the more premium cooler, but usually that would cost you $30 more for to go from a WindForce to an Eagle in Gigabyte's line. normal price you'd be expecting to pay maybe $20, maybe $30. And then the next tier up, maybe the premium 5070 Ti would be an $800 card. And then the ultra premium model will be $850 or something like that. But the fact that we're going from $750 not available to $900 and that all of these companies seem to be on the same page with this. Like there's no one breaking ranks. There's not like you can just go to Newegg and suddenly buy like the Asus slightly higher than MSRP model is $770 or something. They're all at the same price, which is, I don't know, like that is immediately very suspicious to me and suggests that the actual price of this card is $900 and that the MSRP is, for all intents and purposes, just a show. It's a technicality so that they can advertise the card is $750. Because, of course, they have to have some models available at that price. Otherwise, it's just textbook, false advertising, lawsuits, all that sort of thing, right? But it seems like, based on the evidence we're seeing, that no brand can supply any sort of number of 5070 Ti's below $900. That just seems to be the price floor for some reason. It's very bizarre, to say the least.
Yeah. It's, well, they're able to do it because of a few reasons. Obviously, there is demand for their products, and they're not manipulating the demand, but they're manipulating, we believe, the supply to keep driving the price up. We speculated that's going on, and we sort of believe that's going on based on the evidence that's there. And really, they're able to do it though because they don't have any real competition. No one's like, what's AMD offering people to compete with these parts? So obviously, we've got GPUs incoming. There's upcoming GPUs that hopefully will be a bit more appealing. That's essentially the problem we have.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's a lack of competition problem, as we've talked about previously. But yeah, I mean, I just think that I guess it goes beyond that though, because I would say that this launch, as we're seeing here, isn't even like a normal launch for a market with no competition. We've seen situations previously where there's been little competition, like the 4090 launch, for example, and there's been a reasonable amount of cards available. And even going back to like the 20 series, you could reasonably get 2080s, 2080 Ti's. I mean, the 2080 Ti was for a long time $1,200 instead of the advertised $1,000, but there was that Founders Edition and then the AIB cards or whatever pricing back then. But those cards had very little competition, and yeah, there was not really any issues buying them for around the advertised price. This seems like it's the worst that we've ever really seen. This sort of egregious pricing.
Yeah, that's sort of what we've been saying though. So you can't really look to previous launches to get a sense of what's going on here, because this looks like, at least to us, a clear shift in strategy. So I saw one or two comments on the last podcast where we talked about this, market manipulation, our speculation as to what's going on, say that it's a really dumb thing to propose, because there's just no way any business or company brand would do that. Well, there's a lot of hype around their products and whatnot. They'd want to sell as many as possible. So if they do have inventory of these products, they'd be wanting to flood them out there, get all the GPUs out to their partners and pump out as much product as possible, cash in, enjoy high sales, and, thumbs up. So sort of like what you've been talking about with past launches. But our theory seems to be more that they're wanting to maintain these ludicrous margins that they've seen through things like the cryptocurrency boom and the AI boom, and the margins they're getting up top on that sort of stuff. Even right now with the AI stuff, they're wanting to extend those margins into the gaming realm and normalize them there. And how do they go about doing that? So I guess if your objective is to maintain ludicrously high margins that you've seen throughout those extreme periods of demand, what strategy do you employ to achieve that?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious option, you can't really control demand, right? Like you can't just go out to gamers and be like, don't buy this product or buy it at a high price or whatever. The only option they have is to modify the amount of supply and then change various other factors like the price and that sort of thing at the back end. Again, we don't know whether Nvidia is saying to AIBs that we're going to sell you only a limited supply that could make you so that you could only make a limited number of $750 cards, and normally the amount that we're charging you means you're going to have to make it $900. We don't know. It could be all these AIBs colluding and saying we're all going to charge the same amount for these cards, and they're making the fat stacks of cash. But yeah, I mean, the telling thing for me is more Nvidia's claiming there's heaps of demand for these models. The supply is telling us you didn't actually make very many of them to satisfy any reasonable level of demand. And so, yeah, like if a brand wants to create this situation where cards are extremely expensive, and again, I think it goes back to what we were saying in the previous podcast, where it's not about selling everything quickly to begin with to cash in. It's about selling all the units that they're ever going to make of this card at as high of a price as they possibly can. So I think they're going, we're going to make, let's put a number, random number, 100,000 5070 Ti's. Instead of selling 90,000 of those within the first month at $750, we want to sell maybe 10,000 a month at $900, which is going to make them more money in the long term. I don't think they're trying to just, there's times of significant demand like cryptocurrency where they have to make as many as they possibly can. So they're pumping them out of the factory. They're sending to shelves. They're trying to get them sold quick. I think they're now more aware of how many they can make and how many are likely to sell. So they've got a number in mind and they're just trying to prolong that for as long as possible. And again, this only works when there's no competition. So they're really thinking, well, there's no risk for us. It's not like a competitor's going to come in and suddenly have a super compelling. I mean, maybe AMD will have a 5070 Ti competitor. That's a possibility. But for things like a 5080, it's probably not going to happen. 5090, definitely not going to happen. So they're basically going, well, we don't need to sell everything quickly because there's no risk of anyone gazumping us. No one's coming in and being like, oh, suddenly there's a product that everyone's going to buy instead. There's no risk of that. So that, and again, when people say like companies don't want to do this strategy, they want to sell everything as quickly as possible. There are many luxury goods where that is absolutely not the case.
That's what I was going to say. And also, if your competition is also trying to make luxury good margins, then in that sense, you don't have competition. And so far, to date, that's what AMD's done. They've just followed the market leader and gone, oh, we'll try and sell our product by giving a slight discount, which hasn't really worked, but it's allowed them for whatever they have sold to sell at that higher margin. Yeah, it's the luxury goods strategy. Like, this shouldn't shock anyone who's aware that there are luxury goods of all kinds, whether it be watches, cars, clothing. There's even things, there's other luxury goods like electrical goods, like you've got TVs, there's the whole Apple products and how all that works. So it seems like, especially at the high end, that is the strategy that they're going with. And I mean, so far, seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's kind of one of those situations where we can sit here and criticize this all we like. Like, I think it's very fair to say that the MSRP should not be advertised at $750 if the general price of the cards is $900, even if there's a few base models. I think that is quite misleading.
Sure.
But it works. Like, Nvidia is totally within their rights to say, well, demand's really high. Our cards are selling out. Like, people are buying 5080s at these prices. So what are you complaining about? Like, why are you whinging about this price when clearly people are buying this? And yeah, we could say, well, you sold 10 units. But so far, people seem to be snapping up these models. And with 5070 Ti's, again, it looks like, because the launch happened, yesterday? That, again, no real issue selling cards at the inflated price that they were selling for. So, I mean, that's kind of the situation that we're sitting in. There's, we're going to see some pretty crazy pricing for a while until things stabilize. And yeah, the strategy of removing all the previous stock from the market, which did affect the 40 series launch. Like the 40 series, they couldn't really have done this in a lot of ways because people would have just bought the existing 30 series or maybe RDNA 2 stock, depending on what product you were looking for. They couldn't really, like 4090 aside, because that sort of performance wasn't available previously, but there were certainly plenty of 3080s, 3070 type products available when NVIDIA was launching their new 40 series cards. Whereas they've made a very clear effort to delete as much of that from the market as they possibly could. You just can't go buy a 4070 Ti Super right now. You can't buy the 4070 Ti. You can't buy a 4080 very easily. I mean, there's inflated pricing for models and stuff like that, and the occasional sort of unit available, but they've been not producing them for a long time. And that strategy has opened the door for them to do whatever they want with the prices. Whereas, when we say things like NVIDIA's competing with themselves, if there were tons of 4070 Ti Supers available, there's no way that you'd be able to sell one for $900. So NVIDIA competing with themselves, people would just buy the old card. But now that you can't buy the old card, it's kind of like, well, for $800 or $900, what's the option? The option is this inflated 5070 Ti. So that's what they've done.
Yeah. AMD doing the same thing though, because I'm just trying to find. Well, at least at PC Case Gear, for example, they don't have any 7900 XTXs in stock anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think they are removing them from the market because they suffered even worse than NVIDIA did with their. I think the RX 7600 was significant. Like the pricing of that model was significantly affected by their inability to sell out like the 6600 XTs and 6600s. So they kind of had, they didn't want to cannibalize all that stock they still had. So they're making more of an effort to avoid that.
So that's really another factor that's allowing NVIDIA to do this, is the fact that the parts that do, certainly for rasterization performance, compete with something like a 5070 Ti would be a 7900 XTX, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really get those, at least here. I'm looking on Newegg even. They're all out of stock because they're having to clear them out before they release the 7090 XT. Sorry, the 9070 XT. God, that's going to take some getting used to.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a whole separate issue. There's no stock at Newegg.
Well, that plays into it. It's effectively artificial scarcity, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I guess you could say it's real scarcity because they didn't make the cards, but I mean, they could have made more and sold it more. I think potentially part of this was, it seems like both NVIDIA and AMD delayed their models by roughly 3 months each. So back at Computex, for example, we heard that NVIDIA were most likely planning to launch their cards at the time. The thinking was more around the sort of October of 2024 timeframe, which was obviously pushed out to CES, and then some of the cards have been now, February, March sort of time. And again, we heard AMD were most likely going to be doing their full RDNA 4 reveal in January at CES, and it's been pushed back to March. And so if you'd sort of timed your, let's clear out the market to have new cards available around October to January sort of time, but then you're actually selling them January to March, there's going to be a multi-gap month there where you just can't get anything. And so that's going to affect, what prices are going to be, the demand, that sort of thing. There's going to be people who have waited a couple of months that previously would have just been able to go and buy a new GPU whenever they wanted. Now they have to wait potentially a bit longer than was originally planned. So yeah, that's going to have an impact as well when it comes to these sorts of things. I would say that clearing out inventory is generally a smart move. Like it's not, you don't want to have your new products being, you have to think about the pricing of them relative to old products. You want to just be able to make them impressive in their own right, well priced, the option to buy, that sort of thing. But normally we would say we'd want that with the prices being reasonable, not $900 and you should have just bought a card a year ago. So.
Well, I'm having a look at the XFX Speedster Merc, the 7900 XTX on PC Part Picker, and December last year you could buy that product for, Best Buy had it for $840. Newegg the month before had it for $820. So you could buy, you could easily buy a 7900 XTX for as low as $820.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's, if you can find it, it's $1,000. Best Buy have it for $1,100.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Bit of
current Best Buy,
inflation.
yeah. So the pricing's gone up on whatever stock is remaining on those as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you could go and buy a 7900 XTX right now for $830, like readily available from newegg.com, the reviews for the 5070 Ti would be quite different. Right?
Yep.
If you could just go buy that product instead for $820. But the problem is you can't. So it'll be interesting to see once we get the new Arduino 4 GPUs, how all this settles down and what happens there. Of course, there's a lot of what ifs and things that can
Mm-hmm.
go wrong there. But yeah, I mean, they were meant to be on sale in January, so there should be very good supply of them. So whatever price AMD ends up announcing, you should be able to get one for that price.
They need to be very careful about how they approach inflated pricing times, because I've seen a lot of comments and discussion from people saying, well, what might have been a disappointing price, previously is now going to be more acceptable because the GPUs are expensive. While that may be true for a few months, and potentially, there's going to be some excitement around a disappointing price because, 5070 Ti's are $900 or whatever, the MSRP is still set at $750, and NVIDIA could easily make that happen quickly if they really wanted to. If there's any sort of serious pressure, they might not drop the price below $750. They might not do an official price cut, but making a $900 product $750, making it the actual price, that's trivial. And so if you're pricing a product for potentially what is limited time sort of inflated, we're responding to the lack of stock sort of price, that is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. You want to still have the MSRP to be an attractive price long term. You don't want to have people going in 6 months' time being like, okay, I've heard about this AMD card. Let's take a look at the market. Oh, it's not that much better than the GeForce card. You want to, maybe you capitalize even more for a couple of months and then later down the track it sells back to normal pricing. But I mean, I have no idea how long like a 5070 Ti will be $900, a 5080 will be $1,200. It could just be a thing for a limited period of time. They could settle down to more the MSRP pricing in a while. That I think that will certainly, well, it'll have to happen if they're not selling the cards. Like if there's not actually that much demand for them in 3 months, then they're going to be just sitting on shelves, which is what happened with the 4080. So I wouldn't be making too many decisions based on the current pricing of these cards because, I mean, I think I don't know. Would I be surprised if a 5070 Ti was still $900 in 6 months? Potentially. So
I'd be pretty shocked, to be honest. That would be, I think they'd pull off something there that, I don't think is possible. So
I think that's only possible with the 5090, if I'm perfectly honest. I think the 5090 could be $2,500 to $3,000 in 6 months, but I think the demand for these GPUs at $900 is going to, especially once you start seeing the lower tier cards come into play, where there's, because they're hard, some of those are hard to get too. There's not as much of that, I have to spend $900. There will be options at $500 or whatever. So, it's going to be harder for that sort of thing to occur, I think.
Yeah, so the 5070 Ti, I think the price on that one will come down towards the MSRP fairly quickly. And I think you'll find that stock will improve on that very shortly after the 9070 XT is released. Because I don't I don't know what I'm saying, Tim. I want to say I don't think AMD will screw this up. And I know how absurd that sounds when I say it out loud. But I don't know. It's naive to say I'm confident they will have learnt lessons and get it right this time. But let's just we need some hope here, Tim. I'm going to work under the assumption that they're going to get it right. So what I'm about to say here is all I just want to make this clear. Pure speculation. But I want to put it out there anyway, because I think it'll be interesting to look back on this podcast in a week or so once we have more information. But I think it's fair to say, based on all the leaks and the information we were told from engineers at Computex last year, that the 9070 XT is looking to be pretty on par with the 7900 XTX in terms of performance. Take that with a grain of salt. This is just speculation. But for the purpose of this discussion, I'm just going to work under the assumption that the 9070 XT roughly equals the 7900 XTX. So happy with that?
Yeah, my expectation is probably it won't quite get to the level of the 7900 XTX, but certainly somewhere in between 7900 XT and 7900 XTX has been long expected to be the performance of that card. So yeah, I think that's a fairly fair assumption.
Well, I'm going to be generous and just base my workings out on
sure. I mean, people have been saying
numbers.
AMD's been saying, the performance rumors are wrong. It's potentially better. We're really impressed with the performance. So yeah, let's be generous and say, 7900 XTX is sort of the best case scenario.
And we feel that the 9070 XT needs to offer at least 30% better value compared to competing GeForce GPUs, because we've seen clear examples now, haven't we, with the 7000 series that did achieve a 20% discount in terms of value, like cost per frame. And that wasn't really enough for people to buy Radeon GPUs, at least not in the numbers that AMD require, not significant numbers. No. So based on the performance we've seen from the 5070 Ti and what we know from the XTX, I feel like the 9070 XT needs to cost no more. Like the absolute highest price they can charge for this to be a success, in my opinion, is $550 US. That's the cap. So that would make it 31% better value than the 5070 Ti for mostly raster-based gaming. So forget about ray tracing. We don't know what the hell's going on there. And we just have to work under the assumption that it's going to be similar to the XTX at this point in time, as the leaks and rumors have suggested. So,
I mean, AMD claimed RDNA 4 has had some architectural improvements for ray tracing, but we don't know to what extent that means. It could mean a small improvement, a large improvement. Some people have been claiming a large improvement. I think that's probably,
bold.
I guess they could do it, but it's bold to suggest. Some of the claims I've seen are very bold for improving the ray tracing performance. So yeah, I think $550 makes a lot of sense. And when we say things like 20% better value hasn't worked, it needs to be more like 30%. This is coming from an understanding that the reason why that's the case is because, firstly, their market share is low, so they need to improve market share. But secondly, the products are not equivalent to NVIDIA GPUs in many ways. So things like when we previously had said 20%, we were accounting for things like the ray tracing performance being worse, DLSS being better than FSR, other feature quality potentially being in NVIDIA's favor. And so that was all factored into the raster performance needs to be about 20% better value so that it accounts for all of the features and things. So we're under the assumption that if that hasn't worked, then 30% is probably the minimum level in a similar scenario. So it's another scenario where, for example, they're still behind in ray tracing performance, they're still behind in DLSS, in upscaling with FSR4 or whatever versus DLSS 4 and other features, so on and so forth. It needs to be more than 20%. Now, if AMD comes out and says, and let's say FSR4 is equivalent to DLSS 4, which would absolutely blow me away. That would be amazing. If ray tracing performance was on par with GeForce GPUs at the same raster tier, amazing. They could maybe get away with not 30%. They could get it closer to GeForce pricing. But we're just assuming, I think it's a fair assumption to make that they're probably going to be behind in some of those areas. And I think that when you're saying like 30%, you'd probably get to a level where the ray tracing performance is probably going to be similar to like a GeForce GPU at the same sort of price. So the XTX at $550 level of pricing, that card has sort of the ray tracing performance of like a 4070 if we're being generous. and that 4070, 5070, they're going to be around that $550 price, but then you'll benefit from significantly faster raster performance, and we'll see how upscaling plays out. So I think that's a very fair pricing assumption to make, especially now that we've got 5070 Ti, which is setting the expectations, and that's why we're talking about it now, I guess, is that we can now say what the 5070 Ti, how it performs, the pricing of it, that sort of thing, how it stacks up. So
yeah, so I think they can't charge more than $550 for it to be a success. If I were in charge over there, if I was tasked with reviving the Radeon division, I would price it at $500 US and take whatever short-term pain is necessary to make the brand relevant again. Like, I think if you can essentially deliver a 7900 XTX for $500 in the current market, that kills. Really, it definitely kills the 5070 series, and it even takes a chunk out of the 5080, in my opinion.
I think it would absolutely fly off shelves for $500.
Yep.
And what you would probably see is that a lot of AIBs will just make it $550 anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think a $600 price, which
that's a
equates to
possibility.
a $600 price that equates to about 20% better value. That's just doing what they've already done. Unless again, ray tracing and FSR are way better than the previous generation.
Well, that brings me to the next thing I was going to say. So I think they can't charge more than $550. And again, this is speculation based on the information that we think we have roughly at hand, based on leaked information and whatnot. So if that is the case, I expect AMD will price it in the $600 to $650 price range. And then they'll end up doing what we said they should have done in the if the future review reflects what we're thinking here, I will have said in the review, this thing should be no more than $550. And if they release it at $600, somewhere in the $600 to $650 range, you can bet your bottom dollar, couple of months, it's going to be $550. That's if they do a repeat of the 7000 series. That'll happen, because every single card we reviewed, we said this is what they need to charge. And it was a matter of months later, that's what they were charging. But it was too late then. Too little, too late.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be dead on arrival at $650. I just don't see that price working.
Yeah, it's done.
The 5070 Ti, let's say it might be best case for rasterization a little faster than a 5070 Ti. The XTX is a little faster than a 5070 Ti for raster, I think. So to make that $100 cheaper, I'm sure you could make a case, a business person could make a case that that's a good deal. I just don't think that would be a good deal. I think that the 5070 Ti is a genuine 4K gaming GPU in general, and it also can do ray tracing. It's not a card where you would just dismiss its ray tracing performance like a low-tier card. I think it's very reasonable that for people spending $750, $800, whatever it is, to be expecting that card to do ray tracing. And based on your benchmarks, it can. It's straight up, it can do ray tracing.
Ray tracing is definitely relevant for a 5070 Ti class product. It has enough VRAM, has enough raw performance. Ray tracing's on the table. I think once you get down to the 5070, it's probably going to become quite dicey, largely because of that 12 gigabyte VRAM buffer. It'll be a heavily compromised, in my opinion, ray tracing experience. And then once you get below that, it's like, no, you're not legitimately doing ray tracing, in my opinion, to the degree that it's anywhere near transformative or enhances the visual presentation of the game.
But yeah, I mean, I think the 5070 Ti, especially with DLSS 4 performance mode being pretty viable, I think that card is probably in a very good position for ray tracing. But yeah, I think even if DLSS 4 performance was viable on a 4070 Super, there would still be probably the VRAM concerns around that card for ray tracing. It would probably be hit and miss, and would depend on the exact game, the resolution you're looking at, and that sort of thing. But yeah, certainly if you were talking about a card that's $650 from AMD, I think a lot of people would just go, I'll spend the extra $100 to get the ray tracing capable card with DLSS 4.
Yeah, that's right. If if they were to just refresh the XTX and release that to compete with these parts at a lower price, at $650, which I think AMD thinks would be an attractive price, like cut for that product, it's an 18% discount for mostly raster, gaming. And then $600 is a 25% discount, which is why I think they're probably going to edge more towards $600, because that would be probably the biggest discount they've offered, at least in recent times. So I think that's where they would probably start, which I think would be a mistake. I think $550 again is, and if it's a bit slower than the XTX, then that drives the price down a bit further. But anyway, if we're getting XTX-like performance, I'm saying $550 is the most they can charge. They should charge $500 if they want to, turn the Radeon brand around. And if they charge $600 or more, it's effectively going to be dead on arrival.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't know whether $600 would be dead on arrival, but it would certainly be dicey.
$650 would be dead on arrival. It's as good as dead on arrival at $600 because gamers just aren't going to buy it. So what does that mean? If you've released a product and people aren't going to buy it, and you have to discount it to generate sales, then essentially the price you released it at, it was dead on arrival. So.
Yeah, and to be clear, I expect that even at $650, that AMD will sell cards for a while. But I think what we're talking about is long term. Like, these cards are probably going to have to survive in the market for 18 to 24 months. And if we're sitting here in 12 months and the interest in the 9070 XT expired 6 months prior to that, not going to be in a good position. But yes, I think everything that we're saying is that's pretty much what AMD needs to do at this point. And I think they're going to have a few issues, especially with $600, because there will be, while they might say this is faster than a 5070 Ti or whatever and compare it to that card and we're offering that for so much less, the way that a consumer, I think, will match it up with is very much against the 5070 at $550. And I think the fact that it would be more expensive is going to be a big issue in the minds of gamers. And I say that regardless of the performance. I think the performance in some ways for that comparison is almost irrelevant, because I think a lot of gamers will say, okay, I'm talking about mainstream gamers here, by the way, 9070 XT, that's AMD's equivalent to the 5070. What's the pricing? It's $50 more expensive. What's this Radeon brand? Not really that familiar with it because I always buy GeForce. Why is the 5070 equivalent from AMD $50 more expensive? That makes no sense. I'll just buy the 5070. And I know that people will say, okay, but the 9070 XT is going to have 16 gig of VRAM. It's going to have more raster performance and all that sort of thing. But I'm just getting into the mind of a buyer, and buyers do those sorts of things. So I think if you priced it at the same sort of level as a 5070 at $550 maximum, and then people can start making comparisons in other ways. The pricing comparison starts to dissolve a little bit, and people go, okay, so the GeForce and the Radeon cards are the same price. What is the 9070 XT offering that the 5070 doesn't offer at the same price? And so you start to think of things like the VRAM, the performance, all sorts of other things. And that's even further, strengthened when you make it cheaper, because then all those same comparisons are then, the card's already potentially the better buy in its performance and features. And then now it's cheaper. Well, obviously you just get that. And so, that's my thinking, at least, is that I think AMD has struggled a bit with not just the actual price to performance ratio of the cards, but the dollar number as well, that some of these cards are priced at. Like the RX 7600 being $270 compared to the $300, 4060. A lot of people see the dollar number and they're like, okay, whatever. 7700 XT as well. It's like, well, I can buy the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte, which I know you don't recommend, but that it was for a while the cheaper model. And so those things play into people's buying decisions, I think. So I don't know whether I would expect it to be $550. I don't expect it to be that price.
It needs to be. It needs to be. So we'll see. We're probably not going to get pricing information till pretty much the time the reviews drop, would be my expectation there. But I don't know.
Yeah, not sure on that one. Obviously, they're doing a live stream announcement a week before the reviews. So at the very least, we'll be seeing, the performance of the cards, the specifications, FSR, other features, all that sort of thing will be in there.
Mhm.
Whether or not the pricing is in there, I no idea at this point. No idea. I think if the pricing is underwhelming, then I would definitely leave it out. Or if there's any sort of questions about the pricing as well, like should we do 550 or 600? Leave it out. Just choose 550 later. And I just know we're going to get comments on this podcast saying a card that's faster than a 5070 Ti that's currently selling for $900, you're crazy to suggest that should be $550, a $200 less than the MSRP. Like the market share numbers, guys, they're really bad.
I mean, if you think that, you're just not paying attention. Like,
yeah,
it's that simple.
Yeah, and I said in a Twitter post as well that all AMD needs to do internally when deciding on the pricing of these products is, were they happy with the performance of the 7800 XT versus the 4070? The 7800 XT in your day one review was about 20% better cost per frame than the 5070. The 4070 at the time, had more VRAM, had a lot going for it. It was probably the best model that was released in the RDNA 3 series. You certainly said as much in the review. You even recommended it. You said it was a good buy. Obviously, there were the comparisons of the 6800 XT that weren't that favorable, but ultimately you said current market, reasonable buy. And so if AMD was happy with how that went, they saw the sales numbers, which, let's be clear, the 4070 massively outsold the 7800 XT based on all the data that we've heard from retailers and companies that make both models, and that sort of thing. And so if they were happy with that, then that sets, I guess, the expectation of what they're going to do. But if they're unhappy with that, they have to do more. And it's really as simple as that. And if I was AMD, I would not have been happy personally with the market performance of the 7800 XT versus the 4070. The 4070 was almost universally the card people bought. I know some people bought 7800 XTs. It wasn't a situation where no one bought it, but the market share numbers would probably be 80% NVIDIA for that tier, if not higher, worldwide. I'm talking about. Obviously, there are some regions where those things change a little bit, but so yeah, that's how I'd be thinking about it internally. Am I happy with that? In which case, you could justify doing it again. If I was unhappy with it, obviously you have to do more than that. And doing less than that would be absolutely unfathomable, in my opinion.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to be able to go back and redo the 7800 XT launch and AMD do so at your suggested price of $450 US. Because I'm just reading over the conclusion now, and basically you were saying, because I quoted you in my conclusion, that AMD should charge $450 US for the 7800 XT. That would have made it hands down the best buy, unquestionably the best buy for sort of that mid-range product. But
yeah, it was successful for a while. I remember around the time that it launched, you often couldn't buy one at $500. There was a period there where the general sale price was a little over $500. So it was popular for a while, but then that dried up after a few months, and it was put even under more pressure when NVIDIA dropped the 5070's price to $550 and introduced the 5070 Super. Once that happened, it was pretty much dead. And AMD could lower the price. They did a little bit of, price changes in the market, but it's too late at that point. Whereas I think if it was $450, it would have been much better positioned to cope with the introduction of that super card. And that's certainly something they should be thinking about with this upcoming launch as well.
Yeah, I think if they're going to do that as well, they need to officially announce an MSRP, like a price cut, not just quietly discount it. So they have that, because obviously they want that wriggle room, the price to be more dynamic, that if demand in the market suddenly spikes, they can just jack back up to the MSRP rather than offer those discounts, or towards the end of the product cycle when there's product scarcity like we're seeing now, they can make those good margins again. So they're obviously trying to balance that throughout the life of the product. But I mean, they're trying to play the game and they're failing. So I think they've got to stop trying to do that, and they've just got to hit it out of the park straight away. That's what they've got to do with the 9070 XT. It has to be amazing from the get-go, like absolutely amazing, where you'd be crazy not to buy it if you were spending, if you were looking at GPUs priced $800 or less, you would just get the AMD GPU. The 9070 XT is it. That's what they've got to do to claw back some market share and become relevant again.
Yeah, we've seen some comments and opinions of people lately saying things like, well, AMD can't do this because then the Radeon division won't make any money. They can't reinvest it in what they've spent on RDNA 4, and that, they can't just get into a price war with NVIDIA, send margins to zero, and then, NVIDIA can just do more, price it lower, or, people are just going to buy NVIDIA anyway, no matter what the price is. So therefore AMD can get away with a not as competitive price because things are what they are. People will just buy NVIDIA, so may as well cash in from the people that are willing to buy AMD. And I just couldn't disagree with that opinion more, really. I think that strategy is classic short-term executive thinking, where it's all about the now. Like, what are we doing now? What are we making money now? How do we recoup the money now? And when you're in a position that AMD's in with Radeon, it's not about now. Like, now's irrelevant. You're better off losing money so that you can make money in the future than have a situation where you've got 5% or 10% market share, and then 2 years later you've got 5 or 10% market share again. The strategy has to be about how do they benefit at some point in the future. And if you're just sitting there and accepting that everyone's just going to buy an NVIDIA GPU anyway, and you'll sell to your small corner of the market, I think that's a path to irrelevancy, really. I think if you're in that mindset that you're a loser brand and that your main competitor is just going to outsell you no matter what you do, then you're just losing to begin with. Like, it's such a negative position to be in. And even then, I don't think it'll work. Like, I think if you're trying to recoup money selling to such a small audience, that you're better off trying to sell more and more generation over generation, trying to hit those. They need to start targeting the high performance tiers again and all that sort of thing over time, rather than thinking about, can we make $50 more from people willing to buy an AMD GPU right now?
Yeah, I mean, when you're clawing back market share in a market worth billions and billions of dollars, and you can see growth and progress, even if that's not necessarily converting to income right now, it's easier to divert funds to that than it is if you're still pumping a lot of money into it and you all the balance sheets, all the charts just show you losing. Like, you're effectively dying slowly. So and again, if they, I know it's not the same thing, but if you apply that mentality of, what you were just saying, some people have been arguing, if you apply that to Radeon, where would they be? Ryzen, where would Ryzen be today? Like,
irrelevant.
So anyway, I guess we've said all we need to about that at this point in time. We will have some very interesting discussions, I'm sure, in the next few weeks once all this plays out.
Yes, very exciting times coming up. I've honestly got no expectations. I've got no idea what's going to be happening with these products. Obviously, the 5070's in there as well, going to be launching shortly before the 9070 XTs and that sort of thing. So, again,
but I will just reiterate what I said on a podcast not that long ago. If they can't do it this generation, that's it. Like, that, they're done. Like, they can't turn it around. They can't do it if they can't do it this generation. There has never been a better set of circumstances, better conditions for AMD to turn the Radeon brand around than what we're seeing right now.
Yep.
So no pressure, guys.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree with you. So yeah, very interesting times for sure. And yeah, I'll be really keen to see what price AMD ends up going with their products, because I think that's really going to set the tone for them and what's happening with the rest of their products, because apparently they're making a 9060 series as well at some point. So we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, March is going to be very, very interesting, I think, in the GPU market. So keen to check that one out. But for now, let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about our boring lives. So, what's been happening, Steve? Anything interesting to report out your way?
Not particularly, no. Can't think of anything. Just been working. So, and I was thinking with the boring life segment, when there's obviously boring life stuff to talk about, I'll mention that. But because my life consists of working and then just my family, and I don't really want to, talk about what my kids are doing and stuff like that on the podcast for the most part. I don't have too much boring life stuff for the most part. So, yeah, I was thinking we could just inject interesting topics or things to talk about in this section briefly, like just random stuff.
Sure.
I've got sort of one thing which I can circle back to, but I'll give an update on Balin's car because a few people have been asking how that's progressing and whatnot. So Balin rang the body shop, the repair shop yesterday to sort of get an update because he hadn't heard anything. And so it looks like it's going to be probably another 2 months before he gets his car back at the earliest.
God.
So because he drives a Volkswagen Arteon, which is a pretty rare car here in Australia, I think it's a pretty rare car globally, but it's a really nice luxury sedan. Anyway, they have to import the parts from Germany. Those parts are on back order or whatever, so the parts won't arrive in Australia till the end of March. So that's just the parts arriving. And then obviously, they've got to put them on the car, fit them up, paint them, all that sort of stuff. So, it's going to be probably 2 months at the absolute earliest before he sees his car. And he said it was pretty funny because that morning came and he goes, "Oh, man, I'm getting pretty sick of driving the Kia. Like, it's pretty boring." And, Balin's a car guy. He's got a really nice car. It's pretty good fun to drive, handles well, and he gets to enjoy driving it out my way, which is a bit rural. So there's some fun roads. And yeah, he's been driving a Kia now for 2 months. So, it's a fine car. If you've got a Kia or whatever, I don't mean to offend you. It's a perfectly fine family car. Yeah. But compared to his very boring. So he's like, "Oh, man, I'm just, I need my car back. I'm missing it." So he rang him up and, he's like, "Oh, man." But yeah, it's just crap. Like, it just sucks that someone can, you can pay to put your car, you can do all the right things. He paid to park in the city in secure car park. He paid money to park his car. And then someone comes in and smashes the whole side of his car because they just want to steal the backpack on the back seat. And then he's without a car for, it's going to be 4 to possibly 5 months. And on top of that, so he said the only positive out of this is he's not putting miles on his car, like he's doing it on a rental car.
Right. Yeah.
But he's still paying the excess, which is like $1,700.
And his premium's probably going to go up because he's making a claim, right?
Sure. And he's still paying his full car insurance, which is nearly $3,000 Australian per year.
And his rego,
all that stuff. While the car, so at the moment, the car isn't even at the body shop. So RACV had it towed to the body shop and dropped off there. They worked out what they needed to repair the car and restore it to new, essentially. And then they knew the parts were going to take a while. So RACV picked the car up and towed it like 40 minutes away to RACV storage. So his car is currently in storage awaiting the parts. And it'll be sitting there for at least another month. So, I mean, it is what it is, but far out. Like, it's pretty bad that you can just go, he went to do his Christmas shopping with his girlfriend and that happens to his car. And then he's without a car for almost half a year. Crazy. But
that's honestly pretty shocking to me because I've never had to claim car insurance for anything. So this would have been a big shock to me too. If my car got smashed up, I'd probably just buy a new car. But for example, if I was in a similar position and I had to make a claim, I would be expecting, my car's got smashed up a bit, couple of weeks in the body shop, a month maybe. But yeah, 5 months, far out. That is crazy. And it's not the fault of the insurer or anyone like that, or the fault of the body shop. It's just the circumstances of having to
mhm,
import the parts, this
mhm.
specific type of car, and that sort of thing. So
Yeah, so in that sense, Balin's not blaming anyone. So you turn around and say, well, he's got a luxury vehicle or he's got a German car, so that's his fault. Um, that said, in Australia these days, you generally have to. We don't really have local cars anymore. But Balin's not complaining about any of that. I mean, that's all disappointing and annoying. It's more the fact that through no fault of his own, he lost his car and had all these massive inconveniences and stuff. And yeah, so that's disappointing and annoying. But insurance, and again, I'm not necessarily knocking the insurance companies, but it's not always all it's cracked up to be. So, I touched on how Matt had his home invasion a while ago when his young
mhm.
family in his house and they stole his car. So he's got quite a nice AMG. He saved up, he bought the car. So I don't know. People seem to, if because he's got a nice car or a nice house or whatever, then tough luck. Like that's what you get for owning nice stuff. I never really understood that perspective on things, but no one gave him the money. Like he worked hard and was smart with his money and bought a nice house and a car. Like, I don't know. There were some weird comments on the last podcast about that sort of stuff, sort of disappointingly. I won't say what I think about them. But anyway, his car got taken. It wasn't his fault. It was behind the gate in his driveway. They broke into his house, got his keys, took his car. So he was thankful his family, no one was harmed, but his new AMG was stolen. It's fully insured, okay. But he had to go without a car for 2 weeks because once the car's stolen, you're like in limbo. So the insurance company's like, well, if the car turns up in the next 2 weeks, you just get your car back. And, if there's
Right. Yeah.
body damage or whatever, then they'll look at covering that under insurance. But we've had friends who have had their performance car stolen. And you can imagine the people stealing the car, they're not really waiting for the engine to warm up before they give it the full beans. So, it's just been ping. A friend had his car stolen. It was just flogged, like absolutely flogged out of control over probably a week. And the engine was wrecked. And that didn't get covered under insurance because the car still started and drove. It had a
Mhm.
knock, but the engine rebuild had to be paid for by him. So basically, so not only has he had his home invaded and a lot of their personal possessions stolen and whatnot, they've had to redo credit cards and all that stuff. He's now praying that his precious AMG doesn't come back.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't want it coming back completely, like brand new car, completely flogged out. So now he's hoping that it doesn't turn back up. Like, what a crap
So
situation.
what's happened with that? Because that was a while ago, right? Did he
Yeah,
just get?
the car
just got a new
never
car.
the car never resurfaced. So, I think I might have mentioned this briefly. I'm not sure. The Volkswagen All-Track, which was also a relatively new car, that was the more the family car. That came back after a few days with minor damage. They didn't get the keys back, so the car had to be, essentially all the locks had to be redone. The barrels and all that had to be redone on the keys, and the car has to be recoded and all that sort of stuff to new keys. And for some reason, so that wasn't covered under insurance. Matt
As
had
in
to
the
do that.
rekeying wasn't covered. Yeah.
That's my understanding. I could be wrong here, but I'm fairly certain it wasn't. The reason why I'm fairly certain it wasn't because Matt went to Volkswagen to have it done, and it was going to be about $5,000 or $6,000. And so he came to me because I have quite a good mechanic that does European cars. And I sent him to my guy, and they did it for like less than half the price the Volkswagen dealership was going to do it for. But he still had a problem where it took them a while to get either the Bluetooth in the car working or the radio or something because the recode didn't cover that properly. Basically, it cost him thousands of dollars out of his own pocket and countless hours of stuffing around driving the car to places to get it all sorted out and fixed. So that's fun. That's great.
What about the other car? He just
the other
insurance
one
paid him out, get a new one, sort of thing.
Yeah. The AMG never turned up, so he just got paid out market value. He probably again lost quite a few $1,000s there because that's generally how that goes. But he was able to go buy, I think he bought a BMW X5, the inline six turbo diesel model, and he's been very happy with that. Hasn't been stolen yet, so that's good.
Well, I'd hope not.
They've
really unlucky if that.
Well, not really. The car theft and stuff in Victoria is through the roof, but they've installed new like security gates and stuff, and so when it was, I mentioned last week when the police were quite surprised that Matt's case went to the media because it's such a common occurrence. They were sort of saying it's a toss-up between fortifying your house and making it difficult to steal the car, but then, if they really want to steal the car, then, how does things escalate, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, a lot
putting
of people...
some turrets?
Well, yeah, a lot of people in his street have been putting in like fake bollards and stuff just as like a visual deterrent. So,
okay, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are probably real as well, but a cheap and easy solution is to put in convincingly real-looking bollards where it's just basically the police were just saying you want to make your house look too difficult, which is kind of a sad situation when you're like, go for my neighbor, please.
I know, yeah.
Oh, it's so bad. But anyway, crap situation. Hopefully Balin does get his car back as soon as possible, and 2 months don't become 3 months and 4 months, because that's how things with cars can go. But yeah, poor guy.
Yep, very unlucky situation. And it really shouldn't be the case where, because I'm sure Balin will be now a bit more hesitant as well about parking in, what is supposed to be secure car parks and that sort of thing. I was really, just no recourse with those sorts of things when it comes to did the car park not provide the right service or something? It's like, well, there's probably some terms and conditions somewhere about that. And then obviously we talked about the legal stuff as well with, catching the people that did it and all the issues with that. So yeah, it's just a very, very unfortunate situation. I really feel for Balin because, obviously he had a whole bunch of other stuff going on in his life and getting everything together. And then, it just seems like he's just unfortunately an unlucky person.
Can't catch a break.
Sad. Yeah, can't catch a break, which is really, really bad.
The only other thing I wanted to quickly touch on before I hand it over to you is AI. I freaking hate AI, man.
Okay. Yep.
I love how you're like, oh, yes, okay, we'll talk about this.
Sure, yeah. What are you hating on AI for this time?
Well, it's been grinding my gears for a while. I've been wanting to bring it up.
Sure.
The main thing is like AI-generated YouTube channels. So,
oh my God, yeah.
And we've just been talking about cars. I enjoy driving. I like cars. So I'm often like looking at new cars and stuff. And, when they announce or they do like release trailers, I watch them on YouTube. And so I'm probably getting served this considerably more than you are, but you might be getting it with other things. But I'm constantly getting like AI generated car news like that. And they'll make like a fake, like they're bringing back the Audi R8, the V10 for like one last hurrah. And it's like a 3D generated version of the Audi R8. And so they make quite attractive thumbnails or whatever, but you click on it and they're easy to spot now because they've all got like 100 views, but they're just spamming the YouTube platform with this kind of garbage content.
Yep.
So that's problematic and annoying. But what's worse is the fact that YouTube seems to be encouraging it in a few different ways. So one of them is actually promoting these videos. Like I regularly, instead of getting car-related content from the countless high-quality car review and car enthusiast channels on YouTube, like there's just so many I can't even count them. And you get like one or two of them, and then one of these AI-generated, no one's viewed nonsense videos pop up in your recommended. So that's annoying. But I've also noticed now, Balin noticed it in our YouTube studio, there's I think it's an inspiration tab. Have you seen that?
That's the one where it suggests like topics of videos and stuff, and the topics are always the biggest piles of crap.
Well, some of them aren't too bad, as in the titles, but they give you like AI generated titles, and all the ones that come up in ours are like, so I'm not going to name names. I'm sure a lot of you guys listening are aware of tech channels that do extreme clickbait, like news and leaked content and stuff.
Yeah.
And essentially the titles they go with and the thumbnails are what this AI in YouTube is generating. So the AI generates, it looks at what's going on the platform, and it generates topics and titles for you with brief summaries on what it is you should be doing in the video. But then on top of that, it'll AI generate these thumbnails. And in our Discord, I've seen a couple of people post YouTubers, so not AI YouTubers, but YouTubers who are doing like 9070 XT news content using these horrible AI generated thumbnails. And I'm not saying that they got these through this inspirations tab, AI thing. They could have got it from somewhere else. But man, they look very, very similar. And it's just garbage. Like these absolute just crap generated AI thumbnails, and YouTube is encouraging YouTubers to use them on their platform. And it's just making it a dumping ground of AI crap. But yeah, there's just so many fully AI generated channels now. They're just spamming the platform. Like, it's kind of like this was always going to be a problem with new AI tools and advancements. People were going to do this to try and make a quick buck on YouTube. But the fact that YouTube is leaning into it so heavily and encouraging just random people with no skills, no passion, nothing, to just start a YouTube channel and spam it with garbage is just, I don't know, that's pretty wild, I thought.
Well, that's just AI boom stuff, isn't it? You got to put AI in everything so that you get some, return on your investment and that sort of thing. I mean, we've talked about AI a bit in the podcast before. My always issue with generative AI, which seems to be what all of this is that it just produces generic slop. Like there's just nothing really compelling about AI images and or text or video or whatever. And it's not necessarily that the quality is bad. So it's not like, AI can't generate a realistic looking image. They can generate in some circumstances realistic images, and ChatGPT is pretty good at generating, and all those other services, not just ChatGPT, they're pretty good at generating some sort of text. They can make up some stuff. It sounds like a person's written it, except it always, I don't know what the way of describing it is, but it's almost like whatever the AI makes is what like a simpleton would do. Like
are you having a go at my artwork, Tim?
Well, you know what I mean. It's like, like artists make stuff that's like, I'm not super into visual art or anything like paintings or whatever, but people do art and you see it and you're like, okay, that's impressive. You've taken some concept and you've turned it into a thing. Whereas what AI does is kind of like a simpleton version of that, like someone that's not really an artist. They're just a simpleton. They don't really know too much. So then they make a thing and it looks kind of generic, kind of like you're copying someone that knows what they're doing. And with the text things, like a simpleton would generate some fairly generic stuff that kind of says the same, they use the same sort of phrasings and things. And it, they get some stuff wrong. Like if I asked a simpleton to go write a script for a hardware unbox video, they're probably going to be pretty generic and get a whole bunch of stuff wrong. And so whenever I'm interested in the AI stuff because like, what if I could provide the review data for something, and then it automatically generates all the, this is X faster than that, this is X faster than this, or this is X better than that. And if I could import all my documents, so it knows how I write, and then import the data for the new product into that, and it outputted stuff, I'd be like, okay, it's pretty cool. That might be useful. The problem is, every time I've done it, and this is since the start to now, it always gets at least some portion of it wrong. And so it's like we've spent, I don't know, I just feel like there's all this money and investment going into a product that is ultimately just making like a more polished simpleton. Like to begin with, you had like a bad simpleton that like got so much stuff wrong. All the images were like weird and crap and had like fingers missing and stuff. And now like you don't get as many fingers missing. It can write a bit better, but it's still like at a very like they've spent so much in like the investment in this is mind blowing, the amount of money they've spent, and
Mhm.
all they've been able to do is turn like worse stuff into like slightly not as worse.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I get it. Obviously, the goal is to keep evolving and refining it and getting the technology better, which is
Mm-hmm.
that's all fine. But when it's at its, let's say, your simpleton or the slop stage, I'm naively perhaps surprised that YouTube is encouraging just random people, Joe Blow, anyone, to start making AI generated video content on the platform about
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is they want. It just,
Must boost the numbers.
yeah, I
I think it's two issues. I think it's two separate things, though. I think it's the allowing of the AI videos on the platform and not really doing anything about that. I'm sure that is boosting some number somewhere, like views equals better or something. And we all know that there's people that are not very good at recognizing AI content. It's a big problem on Facebook where you see a lot of like AI, children in Africa begging for food or whatever, and it's just AI generated stuff, like same sort of crap. So there's people that can't really identify it. So it must be some people must be watching it, or maybe bots are watching it. I don't know. So there's that, and I think the YouTube Studio thing where they're encouraging people to do it. I don't think they're genuinely encouraging people, but I think they just want AI features so that it looks like they're doing AI stuff because everything's AI now. So it's kind of like they don't actually care about the quality of the AI features. That's completely irrelevant. It's just okay, AI is a thing. What AI can we put into the YouTube Studio so that investors aren't like, what AI stuff are you putting into the YouTube Studio? So to solve that, they're like, let's put that in. Let's put in the weird thumbnail generator thing and the suggestion of topics. And probably internally at Google or YouTube or whoever, Alphabet now, it's easier to get an AI project approved, like let's generate topics for YouTubers, than it is to get a genuine improvement to the YouTube platform approved. Like, I don't know what that would be, but something that would be a bit more meaningfully better for the platform. Don't know.
well, whatever it is, I hate it. Stop
Yep.
it. Make it stop.
Yep.
So that's me done.
Yeah, but it plagues not just YouTube, like websites as well. You often click on websites,
Oh
and
yeah.
just like the first half of articles is often just like the sloppiest simpleton garbage. Like whenever you go to like a game guide or something, like a walkthrough, or I don't know, I was looking up like the list of guns in a game or something, and at the start there'll be this like pointless, obviously AI generated paragraph being like, Stalker 2 was a game developed by these people, and everyone loves the guns in the game, and there's a wide variety of guns, including shotguns which shoot buckshot, and you know
Yeah.
it seems like every website is that now, like recipes. There's always that just crap at the start. Like, I don't know. I just don't see like I don't see how companies are getting the return on investment from spending billions of dollars making software that can do that, and then it's being used for things that I think have like virtually zero value. Like, surely that disconnect is going to have to either it has to improve, AI has to keep improving in the way that investors hope, so that there will be genuine value, or the bubble will burst and they can never actually achieve the value that will give them the return on investment. And I honestly don't know which way it'll go, but yeah, the last few years of generative AI, it's still seems pretty far off to me, at least for the stuff that we're talking about with these sorts of things.
Yeah, it's just made the garbage pile of the internet significantly larger. Like
Mm,
there was the good stuff on the internet, and then there was the garbage on the internet, which was probably almost certainly significantly larger. And they've just primarily added to that giant pile of garbage, in my opinion, especially on YouTube. Like,
yeah.
point me there. Okay, there are some good uses. Good. There, I've seen some funny AI generated trailers and things like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
still pretty janky and not great, but some of them are very funny.
And they're not
So
trying to pass it off as real. It's
no,
like,
no, 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 no,
yeah.
no. So I they're probably the few or rare, let's just say good examples of AI because they're humorous. So comedy's good, but the vast majority of it is just, it's real bad. So anyway.
Yeah, we must be getting comments in our videos that are AI, and you can even see in the YouTube studio like the AI comment reply suggestions, which are often just like completely misinterpreting what the comment is saying, or just like the comments would be so dumb that it would almost be offensive to the commenter to post that reply.
You know what we should do, and we could do it to this video for the people that watch the end, so they know what's going on. Every single comment we get on this podcast, we're going to reply to using one of the suggested AI replies. Every single, no matter what you comment, you're getting a reply.
You could be in charge of that for sure.
Yep.
If you want to click those buttons, but yeah,
I'll be doing that. So you'll be getting one AI reply from the official Hardware Unboxed podcast account for every comment you make. So you can make whatever comment you want, and you will get an AI, a YouTube AI response. So that's exciting.
So personalized. Isn't it great that people can spam our comment section now that we put out that feed, and you can spam them right back in response? How good's that?
Well, you get the warm feeling of knowing I might have read your comment and I've definitely clicked a button replying to it.
You could probably use another AI to automate the pressing of the AI button.
I'll just turn on auto AI reply for that video.
Well, you know how Jared from Jared's Tech, I don't know whether he still does. I'm sure he can't at this stage of his channel, but he used to actually reply, not using AI, because it's probably before AI. He used to reply to every single comment on his channel, like every single one. And he would spend a long time going through, it's great for, to respond to people who've supported his channel, everything. I wonder, has he moved across to using like the AI replies? I am sure he will not even have the time now with the popularity of his channel to do that sort of thing. But I mean,
I'd never doubt him. I wonder if he's replied to any of our podcasts. You can't really look up users anymore, which is annoying. It doesn't seem to work. Anyway, that's something you can look into. They've probably replaced that. They've got rid of that feature. That labor-intensive, stupid feature where you could manually type in a username and search for it. Get that out of here. We want AI responses. So, yeah. Anyway, come to the Hardware Unboxed podcast for your free AI response.
Yes.
This video only. It's a one-time only deal.
You're not committing to pressing that button on every video? Fair enough.
We'll see how it goes. We'll see. Yeah, it's an experiment.
All right. Okay, let's end the podcast. We've talked for long enough. Talked about disappointing GPUs and then, disappointing life circumstances and AI. What a great, fun, positive podcast. Anyway, thanks to everyone who's listened to the end for this one. As always, we've got our video feed available on the Hardware Unboxed podcast channel. That's where you'll get the AI responses. We also have our Patreon page. If you sign up there, you'll get access to the supporter feed, which is ad-free. Also has feeds for our live streams, and the Q&A that we did on the channels up there as a podcast version. If you want that in your podcast players, that's available for Patreon members through the supporter feed. And otherwise it's just available in all the usual audio places. So thanks for listening to this one to the end. Podcasts are going to be long the next couple of weeks, I reckon, because we'll be talking about plenty of GPU announcements and reviews. So stay tuned for those. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.